Welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds, by nerds. I'm Nerdarchy Dave, and today I got Jim Murphy with me, a long time old school gamer who's garnered some notoriety for being in the industry and done a lot of stuff for a long time now. And did you kind of like come into the forefront when Matt Colville did that like 2 hour interview with you?
I guess so. I mean, I had never looked for any kind of limelight. I was
Uh,
always like happy running things from the back, being a kind of sort of DM type thing, putting all the pieces together, but not really wanting to go out there and shine. I was always more interested in building a life and actually gaming. But yeah, once Matt did an interview, suddenly people wanted to talk to me and they wanted me to do more and they kept asking me questions. So finally, I just started, okay, I'll start doing little videos and just people can, see what they think. And as I mentioned, I sort of thought I might be doing stuff with Matt or I might be doing something with other friends and maybe we'd build something out of it, but that hasn't happened. But people still love to talk about gaming, especially me.
yeah.
So I basically find myself every month doing, between 4 or 5, sometimes only 2 if, I'm lazy, videos. And then I show people how to paint and I show them how to, build dungeons and how to make encounters. And then we talk about other games. Like I was playing Betrayal on the House of the Hill Legacy for the last few days. We've been having great fun with that. So I'm a game slut. Well, my wife says I should say game coochie boy. It's more PC. Um, and I play everything. I mean, you name it, I play it. There's really no kind of game out there that I do not play. Sometimes I don't play them as much because I may not like them. I always say computer games, especially like MMOs or time vampires. But
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
I play everything and I love everything. I mean, and normally people say, "Hey, come on over and game." It's like I'm on my way. Then you figure out what we're playing, type of thing. So.
I do not do video games for that reason because I have a little bit of an addictive personality, and then I'd be like emerging from my house 3 months later, be like, "Where'd my family go?"
Yeah,
you know.
I had a chicken bone story that really got it. Is we started playing. I was playing an MMO one weekend. My wife went out of town for 3 days, so I went to Colonel Sanders and bought a big bucket of chicken and got sodas and loaded it all in. And I sat down on my computer. And 3 days later, I looked up and saw this bowl of chicken bones sitting on top of my table, and realized I had not moved from this table other than to go sit in the hot tub, which essentially was my bath, and game. And that's all I did for 3 days. So it was. I thought I have to change this because if
Yeah.
you don't get out and get in the air, you literally could someday come home and somebody will find a skeleton sitting at your desk chair, in front of the computer, because you'll forget to eat or something.
Yeah, in the next age, they discovered Jim at his computer.
Yeah, that's right. So
Yeah.
but
So
I love it. And I'll play, like I said, I play everything mostly now online. I only try to play games where I have live opponents if I'm playing computer games.
okay.
Then that's fun. I, my friend has sort of disappeared into City of Heroes. It came back as a nonprofit, and it's a MMO. And I think that's all he's done now in the last year and a half. Is just played that game. It's
I got
like, oh,
in
I'm
there
trying
for
to
a
get.
little while, and I was like, "Oh no, I can't do this."
Oh, they suck you in. They're wonderful. I was
Yeah.
a alpha and beta playtester on World of Warcraft when it first came out. And I loved it. But you just look at the hours, the
Yeah.
time, and you're just thinking, I could have painted an army. I could have, put together, 4 campaigns for role-playing games. I
Yeah.
could have, I could have cleaned my house.
I could have seen my kids go to school and college, and yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Yeah. I could actually see my wife, it'd be great.
So, what is it like for you having come from an era where there was no online, to now we have these like vast online communities? We were even talking a little bit before we got started. You're like, I would never play online and play virtually, and now you're like, I'm playing roll 20.
Right. Well, it's weird because I was a computer science major in college, which basically means, we were using stone tablets and, little crank wheels
Yeah.
and squirrels running in cages. I'm really not tech savvy. And the reason being is as I came out of college, I went into effectively outside sales. So I was kind of the face. And I never had to use tech. I really was all just, doing stuff. And I still do everything by hand. I mean, I do videos on how to be a DM, and I show people my 3x5 card. I still use the old school methods. In fact, I run D&D Zero campaigns every now and again, and I have all the components, the miniatures from the period, all painted. I have the boards, all the things that were only available in 1975. So I'll run a game and let people see it. But the community now is awesome. I mean, truly, people look back, they somehow have this nostalgic feel, or they call it a renaissance of old gaming. I don't know why. This is the renaissance of gaming right now. You can play anything you want, almost anytime you want, kind of with whoever you want. And God, that was awesome. I mean, it used to be, you crawled around your high school with a board game, hoping that some secret society sign you'd be able to show people. Yeah. Like, I'm a nerd. Let's get together and play Panzerblitz.
Yeah.
Because people thought you were an idiot if you gamed back in the 70s. And it just became really accepted in a basic level, I think, with Dungeons and Dragons. They came out, and when they produced that, it really changed the whole dynamic of gaming. And I don't think anything has ever been the same since. And it just accelerated everything because people realized that there was much more out there than just two people sitting across from each other playing chess.
Yeah, we've made the joke of copying D20, as code for gaming. And like you said, you would look and be like, oh, that's kind of a nerdy shirt. Maybe they're into it, back when I was in, high school as well. It just wasn't a thing that we would do. Matter of fact, a lot of my friends were musicians and they gamed as well. And then like our code word for gaming on the weekend, it'd be like, hey, you want to rock out this weekend? And we knew,
right.
We knew that meant we were going to throw some D20s, and be elves and dwarves or whatever. But yeah, it's definitely come a long way.
Well, I think Matt Mercer and people like that, and there are a bunch of like Chris Perkins and those people. I think they pushed it out to the mass public, which I thought was excellent. I mean, I think all role playing was sort of kind of in a small pocket, and the certain people who were interested played it. But now I think everybody wants to play it. And that I think is a real improvement for the hobby. The question is, how do you keep the level of quality up to a point where they come and play and then they stay, because the hobby really is excellent. And, that's always a challenge. I was just about to do a video on common beginning DM mistakes, because it people who obviously are newer DMs, you kind of see the same mistake being made over and over again. And I kind of want to do a video on how you fix that problem.
So one of the things like that I can really appreciate is like more people are trying it out, and some of them will stick for and some of them won't. Like a lot of times you'll get people that have angst over like the significant other that comes to the game and they're not really there to game. Or, for whatever reason, someone comes to the table, right? And I've always been like, I don't actually care why. They're being exposed, even if they're not there for the game. They're being exposed. They see what it is. You know what? Maybe it doesn't stick this time, but it'll come up. Maybe it comes up later in their life and they come back to it. But at least
or they pick up a different game.
Yeah.
There's so many good games out there. So maybe this isn't your cup of tea, but maybe, Merchants of Venus, or you end up playing, any sort of basic game. Like we said, we were playing GURP, we were playing Legacy of Betrayal on the House of the Hill. And we got a lot of people who aren't gamers who love playing that with us. They won't sit down and role play with us because that's a pretty intense event.
Yeah.
But they'll play board games with us all the time. So, that and there's so much, like I said, there's so much good stuff out there now. I mean, it literally is whatever you want to play, whenever you want to play it. Obviously, the current pandemic effect has minimized actual face-to-face gaming, but new things have popped up on the internet. I mean, things like we're doing on Zoom. I mean, Zoom was a small company, and now they're a major company because businesses and everybody else now start working online, and it's good. I mean, if you're in Ireland, like I was talking about the guys in Ireland, if you're in Ireland and I'm in America, not likely we're going to get together and board game on a regular basis, but we can game online anytime you want, and that's excellent.
It's
just keeping the quality up.
I've definitely experienced where I'm in a game with like 4 or 5 other people, and we're all in different parts of the world, which is crazy. And like I know some people prefer in person over virtual gaming, but you just can't do that in person. You can't game with people that are all over the world at all different time zones And to me, like, that's a cool part of this new experience that didn't
Yeah.
exist.
Yeah. No, I mean, the hobby is only getting better. I mean, there's hiccups constantly, but I think now the whole thing that, like the internet, we were talking about that. You were asking, how the world was for me because I didn't have any of this technology. When D&D first started, I was working in a hobby shop going to college, and I had a clipboard. So anybody would come in and it would be like, they talk D&D. And I said, well, do you run a game or do you want to play? And then I would just put down run or play. And then I would give them the phone numbers of the other people. So I was kind of the internet of D&D gaming in Southern California, putting people together for games. And I started, dozens, if not more, groups of gaming groups that I would go see them and play with them down the road. And they're like, oh yeah, we're all playing together because you told us to get together and play. And, but now everything can be found online instantaneously.
So you're basically a matchmaker for gaming. And we lost Jim. Hopefully he'll be back in a moment. I'm not sure what happened there. So we'll give him a couple minutes and see if he does not come back. And who knows? But in the meantime, if you have any questions, feel free to ask in the chat. It's really cool to have Jim on. It's rare that I have someone on here talking about gaming that has actually been gaming longer than me and is older than me. So, it's kind of fascinating to see what I could look like in another 15 years, 10, 20 years from now. It's kind of cool that, this is a hobby that we can keep doing and coming back. As Nerdarchy, oftentimes, we'll see a lot of comments, messages, emails from gamers that kind of like grew out of the hobby, real life got in the way and they went back, they stopped gaming for whatever reason, family, career. And then they'll find our channel and they'll be like, oh, these old guys like us are still doing stuff, right? Still gaming. And it is, they'll mention it like that helped them come back to the hobby. It's like, that's one of our favorite stories. Like we love the, getting stories where like new gamers come to the hobby because they found the channel and they see, see what's possible and discover this hobby. But I as old dudes, I think there's like a special place for the gamers that come back into the hobby and, they have been out of it for a couple years or whatever. So, that's a little bit of a different perspective for us. Joe, great to hear. Definitely great to hear the tales of your. Yeah, hopefully Jim will come back so we can hear some more of those tales. It's weird because usually we bring on the guests for a little bit before we get started and everything seemed to be okay, and then bam, hopefully he can figure out. Looks like we might be getting him back.
Did you have me or did I lose you?
I'm not sure. We did not have you. You lost us.
Something weird happened here.
Yeah, it's the internet. Things on the internet always happen weird.
Anyway, sorry about that.
No biggie. So I just keep talking anyway. So I don't know if you have any kids or not.
No, never had any children, which was unfortunate. We have some adopted children, so but they're like not real children. They were friends, and as things got on, their lives went in different directions. So we ended up adopting them. And it's a long story.
Sometimes that's even better. They're the ones you pick.
That's right.
Because for me, like the experience is like kind of going through and enjoying this hobby, and now like my son is had gotten into the hobby as well, and like he's going to be 20 this year, so it's just like just like these different perspectives about gaming.
Oh yeah, I mean the game's going to look different and it's going to play different for him, and we're playing with second and in some cases now third generation gamers, where it's the grandchildren who are gaming. That's kind of fun. I have some of the little what I can't think of, the little Mouseketeer games where I've been painting little, to get younger kids interested in the gaming. So, it's a great hobby. It's a lifelong hobby, and I think it teaches you a lot of good virtues, and it teaches you a lot of good skills. I mean, I always lend, and I tell people that most of my business success came from basically gaming. I mean, the idea of how to do things in actual business was all basically things I learned from games. The organizations, the way to look at a problem, the way to think outside the box on a problem and do something different to get around the problem. You know, so if a big troll's standing in your way, well, you got to figure out a way around him. And you may not be able to go through him. And, you know, so I would have that same concept in business for all my life. I mean, I would get into competitive situations in business and it would be like, well, wait a second now. What would my dwarf do? You know, how do you work around this problem and find the secret door to get through? And literally, I mean, that was almost, I used to laugh. That was almost what my mindset in big business meetings with suits and ties and guys, you know, in boardrooms. And I'd have this role-playing thing genre going in my mind on how to deal with this problem here, you know. And
Well, I mean, you know, business has been using role play as a form of training for a long time. So it only makes sense that you're just applying, you know, you would apply that strategy and tactic, you know.
yeah, it is. You know, many things you do just are based upon things you learn in gaming because it is a situation. And gaming has been going on since the Palanides Club in Greece. I mean, this is not a new thing. They understood even back then that, you know, gaming has value because it gives you a dynamic way of thinking at things that most people don't have.
So one of the things I was talking about, why I had kind of beamed out was like, as much as we love getting new gamers into the hobby, we have this weird niche where we get a lot of gamers that left or stopped playing and they're coming back after like 10, 20 years of not being in the hobby. And and it's almost like they're almost like my favorite comments and messages to get. Because as much as I love new gamers coming in, like the old gamers coming back, you know, is super relatable to me.
Well, based on even what you were saying, one of my new best friends I have gaming with, and I'll be gaming with him tonight, he's about your age, and he has a grown son who plays, and he got back into gaming. You know, he has 5 kids, so at some point he had to give up gaming and work, you know, 90 hours a week type of thing.
Yeah.
And then as the kids got older and they all graduated school and all that stuff going on, he found himself back into gaming. And he's online, so he's been watching me, and he lives locally. So he came to an event I threw and we just hit it off. So now we game regular, you know, and and he's got a huge group and we're playing D&D 4th edition, you know, and Fantasy Trip. So we're playing games that are not within what you would call the standard norm of the mass market type gaming. And we're having a great time. He's a good gamer, but it's very strange, you know, because he came back and I don't know why I got out of it other than I had to bust my butt.
Yeah.
But, he says, I'm glad to be back. We're having the greatest time now. It's sort of kind of, you know, the resurgence of gaming. Yeah. And since I have everything, I drag all this stuff over here and I give him stuff. He's like, well, give me some money. I said, here, these figures, I don't mind giving you. I have so many, you have no idea. So, you know, I'll never use these again. Please take them and enjoy them. So, but yeah, people coming back into the hobby, I think, appreciate it more because they've been out of it. They have the fond memories. And then when they come back, the gaming's better.
Yeah. Well, we get to a certain point in our life and we feel for whatever reason we have to give up these things that are quote unquote childish things. But like, you know, we're going to do stuff with our free time anyway. And this just always made more sense than going to the bar and, why, I'm not that into sports. And, really, those are just things that you use to pass time while you socialize. And that's what this has always been to me.
Or you buy a fast car, or you get a speedboat, or, you know, or you chase women when your wife's not looking. I mean, people do stupid things. I mean, really, are they more adult than what we do?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't really know of most gamers, almost all gamers I've known, they all turn out to be decent people. And that's more important to me than you run into some guy who thinks he's, you know, too cool for the room, you know, because he's got all life figured out. He's made a boatload of money, but he's a jerk. You know, and it's the good values. I mean, you know, when D&D first came out, people said, oh my God, it's satanic, or it's this, or it's that. And I said, no, it's nothing but heroics. I mean, that's the thing. You're learning teamwork, you're learning interactions and how to deal with people. And you're learning that, you know, you have the choice of doing the right thing or the wrong thing, but you don't have the consequences of, you know, so if you want to be a bad guy, you can go be a bad guy in the game and then realize, oh, I really was kind of a jerk. You know, that wasn't really what I want to be. I want to be the hero. I don't want to be, you know, the evil Dark Lord, you know, who's really trying to manipulate other people and destroy their lives. And that's what it taught me. I mean, I did not like being, and being the DM, of course, I'm the bad guy all the time, but to me, I'm always rooting for the heroes. I'm like, come on, this is gonna be tough, but you're gonna beat it. Come on, don't quit.
You're the bad guy, but you're the bad guy that's there to bring out the good guy and the heroics from the heroes.
That's right. And you can secretly sort of manipulate that. I mean, when there's an advantage in being heroic, you can be evil and you get what you get. But I tend not to reward people greatly for being bad. They can do what they want to do, or eventually they can become an NPC villain. But normally the whole thing is, will you? Like Matt said in one of the original videos, will you go save? My little kid comes up to you in the first adventure and says, "Please save my pig. The goblin stole my pig. Please save him." And that's it. I mean, do you do the right thing, or it's like, well, why am I going to save your pig? I'm a hero. But that's maybe what a hero does.
The hero does save the pig. I feel like too, like the evil games and playing the bad guy is kind of like a kid thing, like something that I was interested in doing in my late teens, early 20s, maybe. And then as you get older, you're like, you see enough bad stuff in the world as it is, and you're like, right. I just want to help people and save them now.
Right. Well, I mean, I've already had enough stories I've done of the times I've run bad characters and evil characters and trashed parties with both of them and stuff. And after a while, you just think, that more than likely was not a good experience for those other people. So you think, really, was that what you wanted to do? Come in and ruin somebody's day. It's that's always a problem in real life. People do stuff, and then it's like with all the things going on, I always just put out a thing. I said, look, just don't do something that you're going to sit back 20 years from now and regret for being a jerk because you hurt somebody or you did something bad. I mean, it's just as easy to be a good person and do the right thing as it is to do the wrong thing and be a bad person. And that should come out in gaming as well. I mean, I talk about all the careers I moved up in business, but I never told people. I never mentioned a word. Just you champion them behind the scenes and you help them get their, move forward. You don't need credit. Doing the right thing was its own reward. And that is and in role playing, usually doing the right thing gets you magical items and cool stuff. So it's you even get a real reward, type of thing.
XP and gold to do it for the XP and gold.
That's right.
Yeah. And you know what too, like, it's really easy to get wrapped up in these games and this hobby, and they're awesome. But the great part about it is the way it brings people together, and you make lifelong
it crosses all lines.
Yes.
I mean, that's the thing I liked more than anything else. When I kind of got back in it, we were watching a lot of videos, they were talking about how women were not included. And we found that really weird because in 75, every game we played was usually 50-50. It was usually somebody and their girlfriend, or in my case, my girlfriend was the main driver in the role-playing game. She loved it more than I did. So, she wanted to play. I was going to make sure there were games to play because, hey, she was my girlfriend and she was hot. So it was, but every time we got together, it was usually 6 to 8 people. And it was always, 3 or 4 girls and 3 or 4 guys. And as far as races, that's everybody. I mean, if you were a nerd, that it didn't matter. You had much more in common with a nerd of any dynamic than you did with most jocks or anything else. My friend Don makes a great statement. He says, somebody moves into my neighborhood, first question I ask is, do you game?
Yeah.
And if they say yes, they're my new best friend. I don't care if they're blue. It doesn't make any difference as long as they want a game and they're decent human beings. Welcome to the house. You're our best friend.
The gaming is definitely a great connector of people.
It is,
and it's getting better and better. More and more people coming into it.
I agree. And the more people come in cannot be a bad thing. I mean, I've heard people lament that, and I said, there's nothing about having more people involved that can be bad. I mean, they're going to bring some new dynamic that's going to challenge you, and you might not like it. But at the end, it's going to be better for the hobby. And that's kind of more important, I think, than, some personal angst you may have at one table because somebody wants to run something that doesn't seem to fit into your little box. Make your box bigger. Somebody wants to run a Native American heroic character. You know what? I can figure out how that's going to fit into my campaign. It's not going to be hard. You just jiggle things around, you create a little area that people are basically Native Americans, and there you go. You're on the way. Or you can use gates. There's so many things in role playing because the universe is so big.
So you mentioned earlier about playing with people that you kind of like started the hobby with playing. Started in the
Oh
hobby
yeah,
with stuff.
I played with Dave Arneson. I played with Gary Gygax. I played with God pretty much everybody. I saw Dave Arneson many times because we were involved in a lot of different things in gaming. And my friend Don worked for Avalon Hill, and they were all big board gamers as well. Because most people who game like myself game across a full spectrum. So there was lots of interactions. We'd meet at all the big conventions, have lunch, and talk about gaming. You know, what D&D was. I mean, most people don't realize that the original D&D was a Civil War ironclad game system that they modified for man-to-man combat because they didn't have time to sit down and design something. They had to try to keep up with the demand. I mean, suddenly people were screaming for something. They said, well, let's produce it. And thusly how D&D was created. You know, and it's had many, you know, changes since then because they keep trying to polish it, but still the underlying deal is they can't get away from the, you know, the D6 stats and the pluses for, you know, 14, 16, 18 type of thing. It's still a lot of that old deal. They did get rid of THACO, which was a good idea, but
there's still some sacred cows left.
there's always sacred cows, but if nothing else, it's just better to play it to see the history. I mean, I've got my original D&D Zero games I run all the time. Like I said, with all the original equipment that was available. I mean, I found the old boards and I made stuff, and I have grease pencils, and I have miniatures that were only available from like 1976 or before. And I showed this is what it looked like in 1976. You know, here's your Greyhawk. That's the first new expansion for D&D. That's what we're using. This is, you know, it's that day, and today's the day, and now it's 45 years ago. And it showed people what it was like, because it was like that. Now, my miniatures, I have a lot more of them, you know, than I had back in that period of time. So, but it's still cool because I keep out there collecting them, and people give them to me, and people, you know, realize I collect old Zero figures. They used to give them to me. Now they're becoming valuable. So less people are giving them to me.
Yeah, that happens. Brian wants to know any good Halloween gaming experience. Summer is ending and I can't wait for the fall.
Call of Cthulhu, or how we played live Call of Cthulhu games on Halloween.
Live is in like LARP or as RPG?
Yeah, like yeah, exactly. If somebody would bring a hollow, you know, we found an old abandoned house or something, or an old house that was decrepit, and we'd find the realtors who were selling it, and, you know, schmooze them up like, you know, hey, we want to take it. They weren't thinking about buying this, and they'd like, well, here, we'll give you the keys. And I said, well, you know, can I, you know, and so you go over there and I mean, I would not recommend this. It's highly illegal, but it was like things you did when you were young. Yeah. But we used to do that on Halloween. We'd have like, you know, live events where we would, you are out in the world. We used to, you know, things that now more than likely we used to play, well, this will really date me. We used to go to the airports and play shoot 'em up games, like spy games, where we would go in the airport and we would, like, you know, try to find out who the spy was, and we'd have little disc shooting guns and stuff, and we'd end up with little gunfights in the airport because there was no security like there is now.
That'll get you
nowadays.
Killed.
You'd end up in jail. I mean, things like that.
If you're lucky, you would end up in jail.
Yes, if you're lucky, they don't just shoot you or whatever. I think a lot of the horror genre games are really fun around Halloween, and you know, we were just talking about Betrayal on the House of the Hill. Anything you can do like that. And then we expand everything with miniatures, and then you design your own games. But nothing is like Call of Cthulhu. When I had the original Call of Cthulhu, my friend Don and I played up in this house he was renting. We called it Kingdom of the Spiders. It was this up in the hills, and it was in the middle of nowhere. It was deadly dark. And we started playing the original game that was in the first book. And we're sitting there going, I am totally creeped out. He goes, yeah, we got to stop playing. It was just getting too scary because the ambiance of where we were at was just creepy. And then the story itself was great. And that's fun for Halloween. If you can't go, especially since you likely can't go to a party.
I think the biggest thing with Halloween is figuring out the ambiance and setting the table just right. So Joe wants to know if you have a favorite dragon.
A favorite dragon?
Yes.
I usually like the black dragons or the white dragons. I think dragons smaller. The thing with dragons, I seldom run them. The problem with dragons, my friend and I discussed this a lot, was if I run a dragon, you're likely going to die. I mean, dragons should be something tremendous. So, you know, the idea of running those. I actually enjoyed Matt's new dragons. You know, he did his whole little series. I like seeing what people did. I like the deep dragons. You know, I think all the dragons are fun. But often I put dragons in the game, like one of my Albion campaigns, there is a copper dragon egg you find, and it's a hat. You end up with this hatchling of a copper dragon. And, you know, lawful good dragon type of thing, or actually I think they're chaotic good. It ends up being your companion. And as you play the game, of course, it keeps getting a little bigger, and it never gets to obviously massive size, but we had some interesting deals where you get do things. I like to throw that stuff out there, but I like dragons as allies more than I like them as enemies. Something like Smog, I mean, that's what you should have. I mean, you know, it's one of these things that you really cannot stand up and fight it. You have to figure out ways around it, because if you fight it, it's bad.
Dragons are hard to do right, and then like when
very hard.
When the players just traipse all over the dragon, it just makes you feel bad.
Well, you know, I mean, if you watch the movie with Peter Jackson made, I mean, the whole thing with Smog is he basically did flyby attacks.
Yeah.
He never landed in Lake Town and decided to melee with everybody and hit them with claws and tails. He just kept flying by and burning their stuff down. Parties, I've done that in games where I've had dragons just fly by and then fly off and turn around, come back and hit you again. And believe me, characters will not enjoy it. They will be very unhappy with you very soon because they can't do anything.
Yeah.
The dragon comes in, it attacks, it flies out. You may get an attack of opportunity depending on what game system you're playing, but in a lot of the things, they're allowed to make these flyby attacks. Even in, you know, current D&D, I think there's flyby attacks with creatures that they can come by, make one of their attacks and move away. God, that's hard to deal with.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, when you're designing things as a role-playing designer, you've always got to be cognizant of the fact that everyone's trying to have fun. I mean, that includes you, but you don't want to stomp on everybody else's fun. And sometimes you throw certain monsters in there, they're so frustrating, they're so aggravating, and dragons can be that way. I mean, if I run a dragon the way I think a dragon should be run, no one's going to be happy. At least, and you know, and I don't want to end up ruining someone's experience, especially if it's a point where, well, I don't know why I play this game. I have no chance, you know. And people can feel that way. There are a lot of monsters in the game that, I mean, beholders are pretty brutal. Yeah, but if I do a dragon, I usually do a black dragon or a white dragon, small, you know, something smaller. Sometimes a dead dragon. The last use of a dragon I had, it was dead, and little Cobalts were doing a ritual to summon the dragon back from the dead, and they kept sacrificing themselves, and eventually it worked. They were able to get it to rise up. Now, it wasn't very powerful, but you know, it was spooky. You know, the characters couldn't figure out what the Cobalts were doing until, of course, the dragon stood up. You know, the pile of bones basically
what do you
put itself together.
What do you expect? It was fueled by Cobalts.
Yeah, well, Cobalts love dragons, and I always think that's great. Wherever I have Cobalts, I always try to pop. That's where I try to pop dragons in. When I have a big Cobalt lair, then somewhere along the line there's gonna be a little dragon in there.
Do you prefer the modern Cobalts or the earlier edition Cobalts?
I like the little. Well, you know, I kind of like it all. I like the little barking dog Cobalts. I mean, I have a lot of old miniatures all the way up to modern miniatures, and I sort of just mix them now. But I kind of really had a fondness for the little dog looking Cobalts.
Yeah.
But I kind of like their concept. I mean, I really think Cobalts are one of the great starting monsters for a role-playing campaign, because that whole thing with dragons is fascinating. So you can start out with this thing where they're building a lair and they've got a little hatchling dragon and they're trying to keep it alive long enough to become a great dragon that they can worship, you know, type of thing. So the whole thing in my mind is always what the monster psychology is, because you know, the thing that I was talking about, I think earlier about the problem with new D&D players, no DMs. They read modules, they play modules, and modules are usually designed for things to just fight to the last creature and die, and you get your XP and gold, and now you're a murder hobo. Matt Kobe was stunned with his group when first time we played. I think we're fighting goblins, and the goblins started to lose the battle, and they ran. And Dave goes, well, wait, we get full experience points if they run. I said, yes, you do. You beat them. Well, why don't they just stay and fight? Well, because they have little goblin wives and goblin children and little goblin lives. They don't want to die. And then Matt went, oh my God, they're going to run and get help. And I said, well, they might do that too. So suddenly they realized that there was a whole dungeon dynamic that usually doesn't exist in role playing, because people just kick down the door, kill whatever the monsters is, dies to the last creature, grab the treasure and go on. But mine, they don't do that. My dungeons are like, you might fight something and it may run away and go get the ogre to come back and help them fight you again. So, you know, that led to things like the Matt Coville screw that he's famous for, where I always just said, he just go into Matt's dungeon, kick down the front door and stand there. The entire dungeon will just come to you. You never have to move because it'll all show up.
It's just more.
But that's the thing.
More efficient.
They don't look at the dynamic of the psychology of the creatures, and they should, because that's what makes it much more interesting when everything's got a motivation. I ran 2 displacer beasts, and which were a much higher level than the party, and they thought, well, what the heck is this? But they were a pair with pups, and they just needed to get food. So they weren't going to fight to the death. In fact, they were only going to fight till one of them was bloodied, and then they flee. And it was like, well, they could have stayed and wiped us out. Yes, they could have. But they then can't get home to their pups. They have to have a motivation. Now, you don't need to tell the players, unless they, of course, ask you, well, why did this happen or why did that happen? But when you design your encounters, you design them with the thought, well, what is this creature doing? Why is it out here? Why are the owlbears out here wandering the forest? Well, they have little owlbears at home. They got to collect food. And, well, you look easy. And then, well, maybe you're not so easy because you've got magic users and armor and stuff like that.
Time to move on.
But that's the dynamic. And then, the players can run them down if they want, and they still get the full XP. But it changes the whole perspective of how the game runs, because now the dungeon's alive. I just did a prepping of a video I ran, and there were gargoyles in a room, and the gargoyles were in the stone form, which means you really can't hurt them. And they're like, well, are they going to attack us? And it's like, well, maybe. But they didn't bother with them. But they were real gargoyles. But the gargoyles don't want to fight a fair fight. They're going to wait till you get beat up in the dungeon. And as you're coming out, then they're going to jump down and say, okay, we want all your gems and jewels that you found. We don't care about your magic and gold, or we'll attack you. And it's like, what? It's like, well, gargoyles, they just want one thing. They want your gems and jewels because that's what they're into, at least in my dynamic. Other than that, they'll let you go. They got, they're not going to eat you. You're not a consumable product to them, so,
That's great.
So it changes people's vision of the game and then gets them more involved because you're adding a layer and a layer into it. And, it's like bad guys advance, everything that changes with the dynamic of a living dungeon. So hope I answered the question in 75 words, which could have taken 5, but
it's fine. Yeah, but I love the idea of the players having this story where they got mugged by the gargoyles on the way out of the dungeon.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's happened more times than not. It's they stole a very powerful magical item in one game, and the guy had to find them and negotiate with them and find out what they wanted. And there's a whole ritual of basically finding something the gargoyles wanted, so they give him his magic sword back, type of thing. So and that changes the way the game. That gets you more role playing options, which often doesn't happen in games, even with modules where there's lots of role playing color. People don't have the time to read it all, so often they just look at the encounters and they run 1 encounter, 2 encounters, 3 encounters, done.
Yeah.
Well, did you get the story? Did you know what was going on? Did you see where the future is going to be? That's what ends up getting missed. And that's the whole game. The whole game is finding out where you're going to go down the end, where you're going to end up, you're saving the day in the village today, but eventually it's going to be you saving the day for the kingdom or maybe the whole world. We played Traveler one time and we saved the universe. Now, none of us lived, so nobody ever knew but us.
Yeah.
But we saved the universe, type of thing. So,
do you have a favorite type of game to run?
I guess we all default to you mean game system or game type.
Style. More like style as a DM. It's kind of stories you like to tell.
I try to make things relevant to some extent to what's going on, worldwide. I mean, I love politics within the game. I love politics within the game substantially more than I like politics outside of the game. But I want people to, be able to forge their own story. I want their interaction fundamentally changes my game. So what you do, especially if I didn't expect it, is going to make a fundamental change in the game. We had battles where bullywugs, which are notoriously evil and not really very friendly to deal with, but they got into a negotiation. They rolled well, which was surprising in the diplomatic role. So suddenly they had this diplomatic thing going, and they ended up for many adventures having essentially bullywugs as kind of allies. Now, they weren't really allies. They were more like, people who might help you. Yeah. But the bullywugs, they would bring them stuff and trade with them. And it was just a very weird dynamic. But that was because the players change your game. And you want that. You want the players to change what you're thinking about doing, and your game becomes something you didn't expect to happen. And that happens in my Albion campaign where, the elves were the evil bad guys. but sort of after play and gameplay, they eventually became allies with the characters, then thusly were able to seal the rift between humans and elves. So their whole dynamic in that campaign changed to the point where eventually they ended the war. And that, I think, for me, is what makes the games exciting. When players really get into their characters, really get into the story, and then find a way to fix problems that may seem insurmountable, but if you look for that, as I said, the different solution, there's always a way to fix something if you look at it. And even death is, because it's role-playing fantasy, even death doesn't end your story.
Yeah. I mean, and that is the great thing about these games. And I agree, as DMs, we're just there to facilitate the story of the group and present problems and see what they do with them. Most of the times I don't even come up with solutions, whether, it's a puzzle or a particular problem in the game. I just, for one reason, I feel like sometimes as a DM, it just locks you in. And,
right.
But the other reason is sometimes the players just come up with better options, and it's you know what? I like that better. We're going to go with that.
They often come up with better options. Substantially, I find that once they're into it and they understand that they can do this, that it isn't just a murder hobo event where they're sitting down and going to do 3 encounters and collect their treasure, that this is something more, that this is a campaign and there's an ongoing story. They get invested in the story. We put one game on a hiatus, my fantasy trip game, we put on hiatus, and I'm second chairing Forgotten Realms 4th edition D&D right now. And we said, we'll get back to the other. But they're like, but I want to save the gnomes. I want to go back to the gnome city and drive the dragon. I mean, because they've now become invested in the story that I've woven out for them. And that's why I tell people, run your own stuff. Even if you use modules to start adding your own content and start adding your own, heroes and, not NPCs, because eventually you want it to be your story. Because when people are writing modules, they're really writing something that's very fixed, and they have to, and one person's going to have very much the same experience as maybe the next person. But in a real campaign, you want it to just keep being so free-wielding that you don't even know where the campaign's going to go. And, in one campaign we finished, my friend Craig ran, I had a neutral bard who ended up making deals with demons so that they would help us negotiate to take over the city, which was controlled by a really evil dragon who was possessing the queen. It was convoluted, but the point was, it's you're going to make a deal with the demon. It's well, yeah, of course, I'll be able to control them. I'm sure it'll work out. Which is the great joke. Yeah. It's I don't know what horrors are going to happen after this, but we finished the whole campaign, succeeded because I got out of the box and maybe sold my soul to the devil. Who knows? But it changes things, and that's what you want the players to do.
Turns out you didn't need a soul after all.
Nah, highly overrated.
So Thomas wants to know, what new game has got you excited?
New game. There's lots of new games that come out that I was really. Star Trek Ascendancy, I love. That's a board game. Cthulhu Wars, I really love. That's a great game. Betrayal Legacy, I think we were talking about before we started, which I just played for the first time yesterday, was great. That's Betrayal on the House of the Hill. These are kind of fun games. I'm really excited about playing Speed Circuit again, which is a game from the 60s that I taught some of my new D&D guys to play, and they all fell in love with it. And we now maybe 1 week out of the month, instead of role playing, we'll all get together and have our Grand Prix circuit. We're all racing, Watkins Glen, 1964, and I've got all the little painted race cars and everything. So sometimes it's a research into old games. I have a Gone But Not Forgotten Games thing on YouTube, on my Facebook, and we just try to bring up old games that were really fabulous, but they're old. So people have long since forgotten about it. Circus Maxim's fabulous old game. But there's so many great new things out every day, and sometimes I get into them and I'm just this game is incredible. And that's, look for new stuff out there. But that's it. Role playing, 5th edition is fine. I mean, it's hard for me to really get into role playing because there's so many good systems out there, and new ones are coming to me all the time because people are telling me about them. And I love new game systems, but at my point in time now, I'm not sure I'm going to pick up a new system and start over.
What do you usually play?
But you look at them, they're fabulous.
What do you usually play?
For role playing,
Yeah.
Fantasy Trip, Dragon Quest, or in this case now Dungeons and Dragons 4th. I'll play 5th edition. I'm doing that online on Roll D20. My friend is running a 5th edition campaign, and then I run D&D 0. So that would be, it's a pretty full boat. I don't usually DM Dragon Quest. That's my friend Don's. I usually DM Fantasy Trip, and I DM D&D 4th right now. I'll do 5th. I don't have a problem with it. But to me, 5th is a safe version of 3.5. And, I thought 4th was the magical D&D system, but it wasn't D&D. 3.5 and before was all Dungeons and Dragons. 5th edition is the natural replacement for 3.5. 4th edition was an entirely different game. I mean, it sort of said D&D and it has some D&D mechanics, but it plays entirely differently. And people hated it.
Yeah.
Hated it with a passion.
It
was like a huge failure for Wizards of the Coast.
We played for like 18 months. Yeah, it was okay. So what is the draw for you for 4E? What do you like
about it? Dynamic battles. I mean, the fact that you start as a hero. I mean, you're not like a plowboy. I mean, your first little character, that's a full-blown hero. You're out there doing, really dramatic things, and you have all kinds of special abilities. And the fact that you could run a fighter and I could run a fighter, and by 4th level, literally the exact same character yours will not look anything like mine, because your choices of what feats and abilities you take and change your character so dramatically from everybody else. So you don't need to have a combination bard, barbarian, monk, cleric. You just took your fighter, whatever it was, or whatever class you wanted to run, and you literally went down the road. But every level you had this branch, and that choice was going to dramatically change the way your character worked out. Plus, it's really easy for the DM. Easiest thing for the DM to prep a game is D&D 4th. Much easier than 3.5, much easier than 5th edition. 4th edition is a breeze to prep.
I used to really like the D&D Insider tools, which made prepping even easier.
Oh, it did it for you. There, Matt tells the story that the Treasure Golem, and we had it there, and it was like they went into this treasure, and they were literally running it off the top of my head, because they completely decided they didn't want to do what I had as an adventure. They went left. They said, we want to go get those gnomes that cheated us. So they broke into the underground treasure lair of the gnomes to steal their goods. There was a treasure golem, but they weren't 20th level. They weren't going to be able to beat a 20th level treasure golem. So it was like, what level should it be? Well, it should be like 8th level. So the tools just dumbed it right down to 8th level, and it was perfect. And I thought, God, it's so easy. It was tougher for people to get used to, because the players have to be much more invested in 4th edition than the DM does, because the characters are very complex in 4th edition, which they're not necessarily in 5th or 3rd or whatever.
Yeah.
In 4th edition, as you know, you've got multiple options every round on things you can do, so you have to decide what it is you want to do, and that makes it a little harder for the players and a lot easier for the DM.
Yeah, our group went off in like a weird direction after playing 4E for a while, and just kind of like went into some different genres and started playing other systems. And exploring them. And by the time we came back around to D&D, it was like everyone was playing Pathfinder, and 5e was just about to come out.
Yeah. Well, people hated 4th. I mean, the vast majority of what I call the squeaky wheel. Yeah. I mean, it might not have been a large group, but it was a very vocal group that hated it. But a lot of people like me loved it. Matt Coville loved it. He still says, I think it's his favorite D&D edition. A lot of it, and the group I play with now, they love it. It's taste. We play Dragon Quest. I always say your game system doesn't matter. Find the game system you want to play. Fantasy Trip has been one that has been a standby for us since 1980. So I mean, there's a lot of years, but you default. Well, we're in love with Dragon Quest. Nah, it's too busy. It's too hard. It takes too long. Fantasy Trip's easy. Everybody knows how to play it. So it would be the fallback system. It's like, well, what do you want to play? Well, let's just play Dragon Quest. It's easy. So that would be the game system get used.
Did they just redo Fantasy Trip?
They did. They kickstarted it. They just Steve Jackson did not have the rights. He lost the rights when the company that he worked for he left, and the owner would not sell him. Well, he would, but he was like, yeah, you can have it for like $100,000 or something. Yeah. You can have the rights to your game. So what he did is he made GURPS, which was essentially a non-copyright infringing Fantasy Trip, but where GURPS was clean, I mean, where Fantasy Trip was really clean and simple, GURPS was just piled on with junk. So he took the Fantasy Trip and then piled all this junk on it so it would not be sued for running the same game. And it then went to a slow system. The great thing about Fantasy Trip, everything was fast to generate character, fast to generate monsters, fast. And speed is important. People don't always think about it. You got so many hours in a night to play. I mean, I've run nights where we'll start at 7 o'clock and we'll be playing at 4 o'clock. You know, I mean, that's a long campaign session. But most people, they want to start like, 7 o'clock and finish by 11 or 12. You know, they don't want to be here 12 hours or 10 hours playing. So, that's important to have something that moves quickly. So 5th is good for that. It moves a lot faster than 3.5 did.
That's, when we were kids, we'd game, when I was in my early 20s, our group would like show up 3-4 o'clock in the afternoon on Saturday and sometimes game until the sun was coming up. I can't do that anymore, I don't think. No. And my wife would not appreciate it.
I've done it, but you don't want to, because then you end up having to sleep for 2 days afterwards.
Yeah.
You get together on Friday night at the friend's house who had the big, his parents loved everybody over there, and you'd play from Friday till Sunday. So it'd just be, you crash and eat and sleep and then get up and paint and shower and then play another game.
Do it again. So Rocco is a great question. What is the biggest difference between young Jim DM and now Jim DM?
Young Jim DM, well, I think it's gonna be the same as most DMs. It's all polishing the rock. I mean, I now can do things that I couldn't have done then, but I think I don't really think there's that much dynamic change. I liked the game then. I love reading new stuff. I like finding new stuff, and I do that now. And I love painting the miniatures then, and I still do that. I always tell people my advancement got arrested sometime around 14. So even though I'm in a 60-some-year-old body, still 14 inside. So still some of the things that excite me. I mean, we had this great outcome last night in this Betrayal game. I was so excited, playing this thing and having such a great time, and things were sort of, I'm going to die, but can I pull it out? And it was like every time there's a reward. So whatever you're doing now, just keep doing it and try to improve it. And really the thing is, try to make it better, not just for you, but try to make it better for everybody else. Because what they'll do is they'll reward you by making your games better. And that's what I learned. Instead of I think the worst thing, and I told Matt, because he asked me what was the worst experience. I said, when I broke one of my friend's heart in a game, I killed his character, and it was kind of bad. And I realized that's the mistake you make as a DM. Everyone's willing to die as long as there's sort of some gallantry or some important factor. But, to fall through a fake door into a pile of yellow mold and fail your saving throw and die left a bad taste in his mouth and in mine too. So I try to make everything now as dramatic as I can, even the little things. It's like, and like I said, with the monster psychology, there's so much that I want people to think that's going on that may not be going on. Maybe very simple, but I'm going to make you think that it's a real world. That, what's Matt's big word? Verisimilitude. You want that suspension of disbelief. And I'm way better at it now because I've got the dungeon tiles and I've got the miniatures and I've got maps and I've got 45 years of experience. And 45 years of experience makes it a lot easier, to do. So it's the same guy, the same nerd from 75, but the difference now is I'm a lot smoother and I've got cooler shirts.
Yeah, you got cooler shirts. Do you prefer GMing or playing?
Oh, always play. Yeah. Matt really called me on this one time. He was stunned. I said, Matt, you have to understand, I would always rather play than DM. But I'm really good at DMing. So what ends up happening is I default to DMing a lot because other people can't do it. They don't feel comfortable, and I can do it. So I do it. I enjoy it. I don't hate it. I love building the stories, but I still have the heroic soul in my heart. I want to be the person saving the princess and, riding off into the sunset and, saving the world. Even if my characters die, I love having my characters die in dramatic moments, saving the world. I mean, to me, that's so epic, when you do something at the end of the night, you have people drawing pictures of it. My friend was an artist in our group. I love to have people who have talent. And he would draw my character, Death of Guidor. He drew the whole thing when I we were battling the Lich, and I final struck my staff to damage the Lich so we could kill it. Of course, blew my wizard to pieces, but we won. And that winning was so dramatic, and it tells the story. And that's like Congressional Medal of Honor stuff. I mean, you know, you look at these guys who gave everything, you know, the whole life, and they have no future, but because of them, we might have won the war, you know, and that's always something. You know, when I was in England last year, I looked at all the Victoria Cross winners at the Imperial War Museum and was reading their stories. And I thought, wow, I mean, very few people know who these people are anymore. But if this person didn't do what he did at that moment, the world might be a very different and unfriendly place than it is now. So, you know, that I like. So I guess that was another long answer to a short question.
That's fine. And how did that experience, how does that affect your gaming? Yeah, do you take that back with you as a GM? You know, you're visiting those monuments and reading about all those soldiers.
I have to tell you, I think that's the one thing I love about role playing more than anything else. It's the heroics. Yeah. The gallantry, you know, no other game has that, where you can fundamentally go in and save the world, save the universe, save whatever. And at the end of the night, when you've done that, no other game gives you that experience. No other game at the end of the night, you go, that was awesome. That was incredible. I mean, I cannot believe we pulled that off and we saved the day, or we did this. You know, it's like I said, the campaign in Traveler, we all died, but we saved the universe, you know, type of thing. And it's like, no, you sit there and you go, that's the congressional model. Like, no one in the world is going to ever know what we did, but we did it, you know, type of thing.
The table,
and you know, there's real instances in the world that are like that people, you know, people do things that save the world, but you'll never know who they were. And that always fascinates me. And that's why I love to read history and read things about that, of what, you know, things go on, because the world kind of doesn't change. It just, it comes back to the same point, you know, like I said, what we're seeing now kind of is like what we saw 100 years ago in Europe. You know, it's coming around again. So we'll see how it all ends up.
So you mentioned a couple times Betrayal. It's one of my favorite tabletop games. And I generally don't like long tabletop games, but that one is a lot of fun and I enjoy. My favorite memory was when the haunt happened and I triggered it, and I was playing the little girl character, and for whatever reason the party had given me the revolver, and yes. And it ended by, you know, and I guess I won and they lost, because, you know, I summoned eldritch beings into the world and destroyed it. So, you know, that was a blast. And that's like probably one of my favorite moments.
That game has a lot of surprises to it. I got to tell you, if you have not played Betrayal, after playing it yesterday, I highly recommend it. And I was posting it as I was playing. I was posting it on my Twitter, and people were coming back, oh my God, that is the greatest game. We have a whole group now. We play it. And then it was like person after person tell me how much they loved it. And we played 3 games of it yesterday. First 3 starts of the legacy version. And it was fabulous. I was amazed how wonderful it was. And I was like, kudos to those folks for producing a really excellent product, because Betrayal is great. But what you do is you play 13, I think it's 13 episodes. And essentially at the end, you have your own unique House on the Hill maps now for the future. And you do things the same as the game, but it's going to be a little different because you built it, and things will be different than they are in the original game. And it's fascinating.
Yeah,
you know? And it's a great game.
It's got so much replayability as far as tabletop goes, and it almost feels like a mini RPG anyway, just the way it runs.
It feels like, you know, it feels almost like playing Call of Cthulhu in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah. Except for, you never know which Eldritch Horror you're going to get. Ted runs a D&D game based off of that, and uses the tiles. I mean, obviously it's not the scale, but the concept works really well. And he's taken a lot of the things from the game and kind of adapted it into the campaigning runs.
I think that's always a great idea. My Twilight of Fey Albion campaign is all built on a board game folio called Albion that came out, I think, in the early 80s. And it was the whole idea of this Fomorian war, elves warring against humans and trolls. And then I just said, this is such a great role-playing primer that I use that backstory for all my campaigns. And that was the one that, you know, Matt fell in love with. He was like, oh my God, that was the best game I ever played, you know, type of thing.
How long have you been running that campaign?
I think we ran that in 3.5. We started in 3rd edition, And then we ran into 3.5, and I think we ran it for the better part of 2 years. And that's pretty much me running it every week, mostly. So you can guess, I mean, obviously you can just count the numbers of how many sessions you had to have. At least I'm sure there was well over 100, encounters. So they were high level characters. They'd done a lot of things. They were very unique, and it was an interesting campaign. And it's very weird when you turn things on their head. When the elves, who you expect obviously in most games to be the good guys, they weren't good. And they would kill you on sight. If you're a human, you're dead. They're going to attack you. So they're going to be like the goblins and the orcs of the game. Except goblins and orcs are kind of weak. Elves are not weak. Yeah. Elves are really nasty. It made for a very interesting campaign.
So we are up on the hour mark. Final thoughts before we head on out?
What's that?
Final thoughts before we head on out?
I think the thing you made about people coming back to the game, I always feel that, improve your games and keep playing. I mean, find new players when your groups go away. I mean, and move away or whatever. Keep looking for the hobby. I think that the great reward for me has been that now I'm here 48 years later, and I'm still playing and enjoying it more now, I think, especially with this community, than I have ever enjoyed it before. So, don't let people talk bad stuff to you. Get more people involved and keep playing, because I think, game on and is the way to go. Just keep playing, because it's a lot better. And when things go crummy like they are right now, sort of in the world, the games are still easy because you have them and they're there and they're not going away, and they allow you to get together with your friends and share positive memories, not, a lot of negative memories. So anyway, perfect. I think that's it. All right.
Thank you for coming on, Jim. Really appreciate it. And
it's my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me. I hope I didn't yang on too long.
It's all right. I enjoy chatting with you. Until next time, stay nerdy.